Chapter 1. Introductory Passage. In a quiet corner of an average-sized city, Max Bennett made his home in a small, cozy apartment. It was his retreat, a place where he could think, dream, and reflect on the journey of his life. The walls around him felt like old friends, standing witness to his quiet evenings and deep thoughts. Max's life was a journey marked by the search for meaning and understanding. Every person he met and every challenge he faced was like a piece of a puzzle, helping him to see his own reflection and to grow. His mind was always buzzing with thoughts and questions, a whole universe within him that he was constantly exploring. He navigated life with a thoughtful eye and a heart that was learning to understand itself better with each passing day. This was Max's world, a place of introspection, discovery, and the silent poetry of an ordinary life lived deeply. Chapter 1. The Sandbox Engineer. In the heart of a small, sleepy town, where the days meandered by like a gentle stream, young Max Bennett found his world in the confines of his backyard. It was a modest space, bordered by a weather-beaten fence and dotted with patches of green, but to Max, it was an infinite canvas, a realm where his imagination roamed free and unbridled. Max was a quiet child, one who spoke sparingly but observed deeply. His thoughts were his constant companions, and though he cherished the solitude that allowed his mind to wander, the silence of loneliness often lingered uncomfortably close. It was in his beloved sandbox, a simple wooden rectangle filled with golden grains, that Max found his solace and his voice. With tiny hands and a mind bustling with ideas, Max became the engineer of his own miniature world. He sculpted castles with moats that could rival the grandeur of any fairy tale fortress, and designed intricate roadways that twisted and turned, mirroring the complexity of the thoughts that twisted and turned in his own mind. But it wasn't just the ordinary marvels of a child's play. Max's sandbox creations held the spark of ingenuity. He engineered watermills from popsicle sticks, their blades spinning gracefully with each gentle pour of water, and constructed bridges sturdy enough to support the weight of his toy cars, each structure a testament to his meticulousness and creativity. One peculiar day, Max decided to hide his cherished $5 bill, a gift from his father, in what he believed was the safest of vaults, a hollow in the old oak tree, right beside a bustling bird's nest. To him, it was the perfect hideaway, until the tidy bird, disturbed by this odd addition to her nest, promptly flung the intrusive bill out of her home. This curious incident, witnessed by Mr. Wilson, the neighborhood's grouchy old man, led to an unexpected visit to Max's doorstep. Mr. Wilson, in a rare moment of neighborly conduct, recounted the tale of the bird and the money, and handed over the $5 to Max's mother, Lisa. This whimsical yet valuable lesson stayed with Max. The natural world had its own rules, and not all secret hideouts were as secure as a child's imagination might deem them. Every so often, the tranquility of Max's solitary world was punctuated by visits from his father, Richard. Those days were like rays of sunshine piercing through a cloudy sky. Richard would take Max's hand, and together they would venture into the wilderness, where the forest stood tall and the rivers sang melodies only nature could compose. They'd walk through the woods, with Max listening intently as his father named the trees and pointed out the birds camouflaged against the leaves. By the glistening lakes, Richard taught Max how to skip stones, each throw sending ripples of joy through Max's heart. It was during these precious moments that Max inherited more than just his father's love for nature. Richard, a man whose hands were as skilled as his mind was wise, passed on to Max the art of being a handyman, Together they'd fix broken hinges or replace worn-out bulbs, each task a lesson in patience and precision. Max adored these lessons, not just for the skills he learned, but for the stories his father would share, each one a treasure trove of life's subtle wisdoms. Yet in the quiet of the night, as Max lay in his bed, a troubling thought would often visit him. He loved his father deeply and couldn't fathom why his mother, Lisa, seemed to hold back her affection, not just from him, but from Richard as well. Why was there a chasm of unspoken words and unshared emotions between his parents? It was a puzzle too complex for his young mind, a knot he couldn't untangle, no matter how hard he tried. Max's childhood, woven with the threads of creativity and resilience in the sanctuary of his backyard, was a stark contrast to the world he faced beyond the fence. School, a place bustling with chatter and the laughter of his peers, often felt like a foreign land to Max. As he walked through the corridors, his backpack weighing lightly on his shoulders, a heavier burden rested invisibly upon his young heart. In his classroom, amidst the rows of desks and the colourful displays of artwork and achievements, Max felt an acute sense of difference that set him apart from his classmates. Each day, as he listened to the stories of family vacations, weekend outings, and the simple joy of family dinners, a quiet pang of longing tugged at his soul. Max's world was different. His family portrait had a void, a stark absence where the figure of a father should have been. It wasn't just the physical absence that weighed on Max. It was the silent understanding that his parents' separation was a chasm too wide to bridge, a story too complex for his classmates to grasp. While the other children basked in the normalcy of a two-parent household, Max harbored a secret dream, a wish that flickered with diminishing hope, the dream of seeing his parents together again, of rewinding the tape to a time before the hurt and the goodbyes. Each day in the solitude of his room or the quiet corners of the schoolyard, Max would escape into his thoughts, weaving scenarios of reconciliation, of laughter and love rekindled under one roof. But reality, with its harsh edges, would always seep into these daydreams, reminding him that some stories don't have the endings we yearn for. The impact of his parents' divorce was not just a shadow in Max's childhood, but a force that sculpted the contours of his character. It taught him to cherish the moments of connection, to seek the depth in relationships, and to navigate the world with a heart that was cautious yet capable of immense love. Max's journey through the trials of a fractured family molded him into a person of substance, one who understood early on that life was a mosaic of joy and pain, hellos and goodbyes. Max's childhood was a tapestry woven with the threads of solitude and creativity, punctuated by the warmth of his father's sporadic presence. In the sandbox of his youth, he wasn't just building castles and roadways. He was laying the foundation of his character, each grain of sand a silent witness to the quiet strength and resilience that would define the man he was to become. Chapter 2. The Awkward Adolescent. As Max transitioned into his teenage years, the quiet boy who once found solace in his sandbox began to feel the weight of the world pressing in on him. Adolescence was a storm he hadn't anticipated, a whirlwind of awkward growth spurts, cracking voices, and the relentless pressure to fit in. The small town that once felt like a sanctuary now felt suffocating, its narrow streets and familiar faces a constant reminder of how little he had changed, while everything around him seemed to shift. Max's creativity, once channeled into sandbox engineering, now found an outlet in music. He picked up an old guitar his father had left behind during one of his visits, and the strings became his new medium for expression. He spent hours in his room, teaching himself chords and writing lyrics that mirrored the confusion and longing he couldn't articulate aloud. His songs were raw and unfiltered, filled with questions about identity, love, and the elusive concept of belonging. School remained a challenge. While his peers formed cliques and navigated the social hierarchy with ease, Max felt like an outsider looking in. He wasn't unpopular, but he wasn't fully embraced either. His quiet demeanor often led others to misinterpret him as aloof or disinterested, when in reality, he was simply unsure of how to bridge the gap between himself and the world. It was during this time that Max began to experiment with new hobbies, each one a tentative step toward understanding himself. He joined the school's drama club, where he discovered the thrill of stepping into someone else's shoes, if only for a moment. He tried his hand at painting, though his canvases often ended up as abstract expressions of his inner turmoil. And he even dabbled in sports, finding a surprising sense of camaraderie on the soccer field, even if he wasn't the most skilled player. But beneath the surface of these new pursuits, Max was searching for something more. He yearned for a sense of purpose, a way to reconcile the quiet, introspective child he had been with the person he was becoming. Chapter 3. The Bright Lights and Big City. When Max turned 18, he made the decision to leave his small town behind and move to the city. It wasn't an easy choice. The familiarity of home was comforting, but it also felt like a cage. The city, with its towering skyscrapers and endless possibilities, promised a fresh start. At first, the city was overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the pace of life, it was a far cry from the quiet streets of his hometown. But Max was determined to make it work. He enrolled in college, studying graphic design, a field that allowed him to channel his creativity into something tangible. The city also introduced Max to a social life he had never experienced before. Parties, concerts, late-night diners. He threw himself into the whirlwind of young adulthood with a fervor that surprised even himself. For the first time, he felt like he was part of something bigger, like he was finally living. But as the months turned into years, Max began to notice a disconnect. The more he immersed himself in the city's vibrant nightlife, the more he felt like he was playing a role. He was the life of the party, the guy who always had a witty remark or a funny story, but deep down he knew it wasn't him. The quiet, reflective boy who once built sandcastles and wrote songs in his room was still there, buried beneath layers of bravado and noise. Chapter 4. The Return to Roots. It wasn't until a visit back home that Max began to confront the dissonance within himself. Standing in his old backyard, now overgrown and neglected, he felt a wave of nostalgia wash over him. The sandbox was gone, replaced by a patch of weeds, but the memories remained. As he walked through the familiar streets, Max found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought him here. The city had given him experiences and opportunities, but it had also pulled him further away from the person he truly was. He realized that he had been running from his past, from his insecurities, from the quiet parts of himself that he had tried to silence. Back in his small apartment in the city, Max began to make changes. He started journaling, pouring his thoughts onto paper in an attempt to reconnect with himself. He cut back on the parties and the noise, opting instead for quiet evenings spent reading or playing his guitar. And he began to reach out to old friends and family, rebuilding the connections he had let fade. Chapter 5. The Quiet Revolution. Max's journey came full circle when he decided to move back to his hometown. It wasn't a retreat, but a conscious choice to embrace the life that felt most authentic to him. He opened a small design studio, combining his love for creativity with his newfound appreciation for simplicity. In the quiet corners of his hometown, Max found the peace he had been searching for. He reconnected with his father, their bond stronger than ever, and even found a way to forgive his mother for the distance that had once hurt him so deeply. As he stood in his backyard one evening, the stars twinkling above, Max realized that his journey had never been about escaping who he was. It was about coming home, to himself, to his roots, and to the quiet, introspective life that had always been his true north. Chapter 6. The Wanderer. Max had thought he found peace when he returned to his hometown. The familiar streets, the quiet nights, and the rekindled relationships with his family had given him a sense of grounding. But as the months turned into years, he began to feel it again. The restlessness, the sense that the walls of the small town were closing in on him. The peace he had fought so hard to achieve now felt like a cage, and the quiet life he had built began to feel stagnant. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his childhood home, staring at the stars, Max made a decision. He wasn't sure where he would go or what he would do, but he knew he couldn't stay. The world was vast, and he had only seen a fraction of it. He packed his bags, sold most of his belongings, and set off with nothing but a backpack, a guitar, and a heart full of curiosity. Chapter 7. The Nomad Years. Max's journey took him across continents, through bustling cities, quiet villages, and landscapes that took his breath away. He wasn't rich, so he worked odd jobs to sustain himself, bartending in Dublin, teaching English in Vietnam, picking grapes in a vineyard in France, and even working on a fishing boat in Iceland. Each job was a lesson in humility and resilience, and each place left its mark on him. The people he met along the way were as varied as the places he visited. Some were kind and generous, offering him a place to stay or a warm meal. Others were difficult, even cruel, teaching him to guard his heart but not to close it off entirely. Max learned to navigate the complexities of human relationships, to appreciate the beauty in fleeting connections, and to let go when it was time to move on. In Thailand, he met a woman named Naya, a free spirit who shared his love for music and adventure. They spent months traveling together, exploring hidden beaches and ancient temples. For a while, Max thought he had found someone who understood him completely. But when Naya decided to return to her home country, Max realized he wasn't ready to settle down, not even for her. In Argentina, he met Sofia, a fiery artist who challenged him to see the world in new ways. Their relationship was passionate but volatile, and it ended in a heated argument that left Max questioning his ability to commit. Each relationship, no matter how brief or intense, taught Max something about himself. He began to see a pattern, a reluctance to fully let anyone in, a fear of repeating the mistakes of his parents. The shadow of their divorce loomed large in his heart, a silent force shaping his decisions even when he wasn't fully aware of it. Chapter 8. The Country He Loves. After years of wandering, Max found himself in a country that felt like home, even if he wasn't entirely sure why. The language was unfamiliar, the customs sometimes baffling, but there was something about the rhythm of life there that resonated with him. He settled in a small coastal town where the sound of the ocean became the soundtrack to his days. He found work as a freelance graphic designer, a job that allowed him to channel his creativity while maintaining the freedom he cherished. He made friends, locals and expats alike, but he never quite felt like he belonged. He was an outsider, and in some ways, he preferred it that way. It gave him the space to observe, to reflect, and to create. But daily life was not without its struggles. The monotony of routines, the loneliness that crept in on quiet nights, the constant battle to make ends meet. It all weighed on him. There were moments when he felt the pull of depression, a dark cloud threatening to swallow him whole. It was during these moments that Max turned to his inner child, the part of him that had once built sandcastles and dreamed of faraway worlds. He began to paint again, filling canvases with vibrant colors and abstract shapes. He wrote songs, his guitar becoming a vessel for his emotions, and he explored the countryside, finding solace in the beauty of nature. Chapter 9. The Unsettled Heart. Max's life was full of contradictions. He loved the country he lived in, but he didn't feel like a full member of its society. He cherished his independence, but he sometimes longed for a deeper connection. He had met many women, but none had been able to break through the walls he had built around his heart. He often wondered if he would ever find someone to share his life with. The fear of repeating his parents' mistakes was a constant undercurrent, a voice in the back of his mind that whispered doubts and warnings. But Max also knew that he couldn't let fear dictate his life. He had come too far, learned too much, to let the past hold him back completely. One day, as he sat on the beach watching the sunset, Max realized that his journey was far from over. He didn't have all the answers, and maybe he never would, but he was okay with that. Life was a mosaic of experiences, and each piece, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, added to the bigger picture. Max smiled to himself, the sound of the waves filling the silence. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it, with an open heart, a curious mind, and the quiet strength of the boy who had once built castles in the sand. Chapter 10. The Thai Interlude. The Arrival in Koh Lanta. Max arrived in Koh Lanta, a sleepy island in southern Thailand, during the tail end of the monsoon season. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and blooming jasmine. The island was a patchwork of emerald jungles, golden beaches, and turquoise waters, with wooden long-tail boats bobbing lazily in the harbour. The streets were lined with colourful market stalls, their awnings fluttering in the breeze, and the sound of reggae music spilled out from beachside bars. Max had been travelling for months, his backpack worn and his spirit restless. He rented a small bungalow on Long Beach, a stretch of sand fringed by palm trees and dotted with hammocks. The bungalow was simple, a thatched roof, a wooden deck, and a view of the ocean that stretched endlessly into the horizon. It was here, in this tranquil corner of the world, that Max's path crossed with Naya's. The meeting. Max first saw Naya at a beachside bar called Driftwood, a rustic place with bamboo walls, fairy lights, and a sand floor. She was sitting on a cushion, strumming a ukulele and singing a Thai folk song. Her voice was soft but haunting, and her dark eyes seemed to hold a universe of stories. Max was captivated. After her set, he introduced himself. Naya smiled warmly and gestured for him to join her. They spent the rest of the night talking under the stars, the sound of the waves crashing in the distance. Naya was a free spirit, a Thai artist who had left her corporate job in Bangkok to pursue her passion for music and painting. She lived in a small bungalow not far from Max's, surrounded by canvases, instruments, and the scent of incense. The adventure begins. Over the next few weeks, Max and Naya became inseparable. They explored the island together, discovering hidden waterfalls, secret beaches, and tiny fishing villages. Naya taught Max how to cook Thai food, spicy papaya salad, fragrant green curry, and sweet mango sticky rice. In return, Max taught her a few chords on the guitar, and they spent evenings on her deck, playing music and watching the sun dip below the horizon. One day, they rented a scooter and rode to the southern tip of the island, where a lighthouse stood on a rocky cliff. The view was breathtaking. The ocean stretched out in every direction, its surface shimmering like liquid sapphire. Naya leaned against Max, her hair blowing in the wind, and said, "This is what freedom feels like." Max felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of belonging. For the first time in years, the restlessness that had driven him from place to place began to fade. The deepening connection. As the weeks turned into months, Max and Naya's connection deepened. They spent their days exploring and their nights talking, their conversations ranging from the mundane to the profound. Naya shared stories of her childhood in a small village in northern Thailand, where she had learned to paint by watching her grandmother create intricate designs on rice paper. Max told her about his parents' divorce, his struggles with loneliness, and his search for meaning. One evening, as they sat on the beach watching a fire dance performance, Naya turned to Max and said, "You're not running anymore, are you?" Max thought about it for a moment. "No," he said finally. "I think I've found what I was looking for." The growing tension. But as idyllic as their life was, cracks began to appear. Naya had always been a dreamer, someone who thrived on change and new experiences. She had left her corporate job in Bangkok to pursue her passion for art, but she was beginning to feel restless again. One day, as they sat on the deck of Naya's bungalow, the air thick with the scent of frangipani, Naya turned to Max and said, "I've been thinking about leaving Koh Lanta. There's an art residency in Chiang Mai that I've been accepted to. It's a chance to grow as an artist, to learn new techniques and meet other creatives." Max felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had grown to love their life on the island, the steady rhythm of the days, the sense of peace he had found with Naya. The thought of leaving, of starting over again, filled him with dread. "I don't know if I'm ready for another new beginning," he admitted. "I'm tired of always being on the move. I just want to stay here, with you." Naya reached for his hand, her expression softening. "I understand," she said, "but I need to do this. I need to grow, to challenge myself, and I want you to come with me." Max wanted to say yes, to promise her that he would follow her anywhere, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he found himself making excuses about how he needed to figure things out, about how he wasn't sure if he was ready to leave the life they had built. Naya listened quietly, her eyes filled with sadness. "I understand," she said finally, "but I can't wait for you to figure it out. I need to do this for myself." The goodbye. The next morning, Naya left for Chiang Mai. Max stayed behind, his heart heavy with regret. He spent the next few weeks wandering the beaches alone, replaying their conversations in his mind. He wondered if he had made a mistake, if he had let fear hold him back from something beautiful. But deep down, he knew that Naya had been right. She needed to grow, to pursue her dreams, and he couldn't stand in her way. As he boarded a plane to his next destination, Max made a promise to himself. He would keep searching, keep growing, until he was ready to love someone without reservation. Until then, he would carry Naya's memory with him, a reminder of what could have been, and what might still be. Chapter 11. The Argentine Chapter.